Ask that you all please rise. We'd like to invite Arnold Jackson from Mount Moriah ME Church to please come forward and give us the invocation, after which I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
If we could just take a moment of silence for the 17 individuals that were killed in the shooting at South Florida High School. O God, our help in ages past and our hope for years to come, we invite your presence in this city council meeting tonight, and we thank you for everyone that's here, from all the volunteers, from the mayor, the vice mayor, city council, and the interim city manager and staff. We pray your blessings and guidance as we go forth, and we thank you for the cooperation that the city has. Be with us tonight and be with the agenda, and we will forever give you the glory, honor, and praise. In the name of Jesus we pray, and for his sake, we all said amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you, Reverend Jackson. Appreciate it. At this time, we'd like to move to the roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilwoman Gussie? Here. Councilmember Manfredi? Here. Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Wade?
Here.
Vice Mayor Chapados?
Here.
Mayor Price?
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That'll take us to item 3, proclamations, acknowledgments, and awards. And actually, at this time, we do have a video, but I'm going to turn the time over to Councilmember Smith and Vice Mayor Chapados.
We're going to see a short video on the 2018 Senior Info Expo, and then we're going to do a little presentation. So you can roll the video, guys.
What's happening here today in City Hall is the 3rd annual Senior Info Expo, presented by the Age-Friendly Committee and also the City of Maricopa. It's a one-stop shop for anybody in Maricopa to come and get resources for seniors, about seniors, have a good time, see some city departments and find out what programs and activities they offer, and just have a great experience.
Feedback I've gotten has been extremely positive. Individuals have indicated that this is really growing. This is our 3rd year. The exhibitors is up by 25% from last year. So it's been extremely positive, and they like it. They want to really see it continue from this year forward.
My name is Steve. I'm with Visiting Angels Home Care, and we are actually one of the sponsors for this wonderful, wonderful event. We're so happy to be here. We provide non-medical home care to families in their homes. We pride ourselves first and foremost in caring for others, and that's why we're here.
I'm with Maricopa Ace Hardware, and we're participating here simply to show our support for the city of Maricopa, the entire community, and especially the senior community in Maricopa. Big senior population in Maricopa, and they always show support of everything in the city. So it's exciting to be here.
Something like the Senior Info Expo is really important for our residents. One, because we don't have a lot of permanent brick and mortar resources here in the city, but this is a way to bring all of the resources to the seniors and to our residents. They have one place that they come and they can get all kinds of great information, meet the people that may be here part-time or that may be thinking about coming or that are within a short drive distance from our city. It's just a really convenient way for us to put resources directly into the hands of the people that need them the most.
Well, that was our 3rd annual Senior Info Expo, and we're really excited about it. I just want to take a moment and to recognize and to thank our sponsors, the Arizona Department of Health Services, the Pinal Hilla Council for Senior Citizens, which is the area agency on Aging Region 5. You saw in the video Maricopa Ace Hardware, Vice Mayor Peg Chapados and Councilmember Nancy Smith were also sponsors, and I believe you saw the Visiting Angels Home Care as one of our sponsors. They make it possible for us to have the Senior Info Expo. And the theme this year, as you saw, was Resources on Course. We also want to thank all the city departments, the city manager's office, the facilities managers, IT, which included audio-visual assistance and a lot of troubleshooting for our presenters, the Maricopa Fire and Medical Team, Maricopa Police, Maricopa Public Library, Copper Sky, and Comet Transit Services. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Smith for some statistics.
Thank you, Arnold. I'm really excited to talk about the statistics from our third annual event. The attendees was 304 people attended, which is a number up 112% from last year. We had 272. So pretty exciting as we see it grow over year. We also had 18 workshop titles this time, which is phenomenal considering last year we had 8, which is a 225% growth. And each of the different workshops were heavily attended and very welcome from most of the people who attended. We had 44 exhibitors, which is up 118% from last year, 37 exhibitors last year and 44 this year. Some of our highlights, I can tell you that if you want to get a hearing test, better get there early and get your name on the list, because they actually went an hour over because of the amount of people that want to take. So a very, very popular event. We had topics on elder abuse and caregiving and caregivers. That's another one. This doctor that comes in is very popular, who talks about caregiving and caregivers. And I had to knock on the door, open it 3 times, finally had to go, but a very popular doctor and really good information shared there. And then things like anything regarding Medicare, 5 things that no one has told you, which, you know, if you're approaching that age bracket, that's important to know. But really cool information was shared. People were very appreciative. It was a really fun event. I'm going to turn it over to Vice Mayor Chapados now.
So as you've heard, this was our third annual Senior Info Expo, and an event of this magnitude can't be done by one person or one committee alone. So you've heard all the people that we've worked with, but I want to make a couple of special mentions of some of the folks that helped us do this. First is the Age-Friendly Maricopa Committee. We have a committee of 7 people that have spent several months vetting different ideas and options. They go out, they solicit exhibitors, they help us talk to sponsors, that kind of thing. I also want to acknowledge one of our youth council members. She showed up here. We have a 2-day event. The first day is the setup and the prep. The second day is the event. She showed up and worked tirelessly for 2 days straight. Taylor Cochran, she was phenomenal. It was always like, well, what can I do to help? What do you need now? Can I come back tomorrow? I'll stay till the very end. And this lady rode her bike here or walked here most days. So we also had some invaluable assistance from the Maricopa Police Department Volunteers and Police Service, the VIPS volunteers. As you know, we have free shuttle service thanks to Copper Sky, so you park in the parking lot, or in this case out on the dirt, and they will shuttle you to the front door. And last but not least is a group that just rose above all expectations this year. So I would like to have them come up, and we have a special presentation for our Maricopa Fire and Medical CERT volunteers. Come on up, guys. These guys showed up. They hefted tables and chairs. They helped us put up signs. They greeted and helped check in for the attendees. They were running around picking up garbage. They were doing whatever, wherever they were needed. And we couldn't have done it without you, so thank you so much. And Mr. John Mulquin is the coordinator of CERT. We've also got, well, we had Fire Marshal Eddie Rodriguez here. We just want to, there he is. We just want to thank you very much for all that you've done. It was a large part to your involvement that this event was so successful. So we have a little something for you. I also want to thank our videographers. You guys did a great job. Thanks so much for that video. Thank you, Mayor.
Many, many thanks all to a job well done. We appreciate it and appreciate all your volunteer hours because things like that can't happen without your help. So again, thank you, thank you, Reverend Jackson and Council Members Reverend Jackson, Council Members Smith and Vice Mayor Chapados. It's not coming out tonight. It's just, I think you started it, Councilmember Smith. It's all your fault. No, I appreciate it. That'll take us to item 4 then, report from the mayor. At this time, I have the legislature's back in session, and as you can tell, that means that the hurt on cities and towns is on full court press. And so, I'd like to give it to you straight. The reality is there is a vehement difference of opinion as to the value of cities and towns. Probably from you all, certainly from us up here who are trying to defend your rights and what you do here in a city, but certainly at the legislature. So I don't want to beleaguer the point, but I've spent a great deal of time down at the AZ League. I know that our intergov, Dale Webush, has spent an inordinate amount of time, and we joke that we don't see him here very often during the legislative session, and that's the way it should be. But I spent a bunch of time down at the legislature. I spent 4.5 hours down there the other day in the government subcommittee, in which we were testifying on a bill that we collectively ran as a Arizona League of Cities and Towns to basically amend or fix some of the problems that we all see with a bill that was rather painful called 1487. And we figured that coming from the Attorney General's office that there would be some weight to this. If it just came from us, the League of Cities and Towns, that it might not carry as much weight. And these were fixes that they needed as well as we wanted to see. Extra time to get things done in the legal process. Right now we are not afforded a due process in which we do not have the ability to go through a direct claim to the Arizona Supreme Court. However, the Attorney General does. The Attorney General kind of gets to act as judge, jury, and executioner if a member of the state legislature feels that a city or town is doing something against the law. And I think that, there's 91 cities and towns. I don't know that I can speak for all of them, but I would think that, I work too hard to want to go to jail for doing something stupid. So at the end of the day, I think most cities and towns are that way, and we don't want to break state law. We won't, but at the same time, if it needs to be changed or fixed, that we are amenable parties to fixing it. And that's not what we've been given under this bill of 1487. And so because of it, basically any member of the legislature for any reason can accuse any city and any subdivision, any city anywhere in the state, and basically say that, this is going to go to the Attorney General's office. There's zero accountability from that legislator making the accusation being in that district to face their voters. And so basically, if I have an accusation against one of you all and you're in a different part of the state and you don't have an accusation, we testify through the subcommittee this year, and this on many other bills that are to discussions on that when it needs be or the system arises that you'd have questions for us. So we want you to understand the ins and outs of the way this sausage making process works, and so it can get troublesome at times. On the flip side, some happier notes. Did have the opportunity, as many of the council members talked to about earlier, the Copa Shorts Film Festival. This is a very mini version and an early version of something like Sundance, and it's something that we hope to see continue. Many of you had the opportunity to go, as did many of us, and it was a wonderful opportunity. It's nice to see the attention that is bringing from around the state, trying to increase filmmaking tourism. That sounds like something you probably haven't thought of or heard of much, but when you think of what goes into the production of a film or a commercial, that's a lot of people and a lot of money that's being transacted, and so we'd like to capture more of that, and so certainly having this here is a big deal. And so we'd like to thank all those who participated as well as put it on. So Shelley Gillespie and Roger, it's really a labor of love from them, and they do a great job. Also had the opportunity to attend the I-11 Coalition meeting. This is a grassroots group that is both member agencies such as counties and cities, as well as state and local politicians or leaders as well as business owners and people that understand the value of what an I-11 freeway coming through the state of Arizona would do, creating that north-south access and really coming right through the planning area of the city of Maricopa. It would absolutely change our future and fortunes in the coming days, or years, I should say, because big projects like that take a while. But we have to do our part to make sure that it happens. And so we meet regularly with a variety of people, and so we had the opportunity to present with Supervisor Smith at this presentation and talk about what we're doing as a Pinal County subversion of that coalition to help influence the decision makers when and where we can. Of course, we can't get in the way and make anything illegal, but we can certainly persuade and continue to push for the studies that have already been done and those lines on the map that already exist that we are in favor of. And so we certainly would love to see that happen, and I'm sure that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would love to see those days as well, as we get to see the economic boon that comes from great transportation byways. And then last but not least, we had the closeout of a program that we started this year for the first time, called the Maricopa Weight Loss Challenge. As you may know, we had 500 people sign up on the Facebook page to participate in some fashion. Some people followed their own designs, some people followed ones that the city prescribed. It was at the very little taxpayer cost, and it was with staff that already were doing what they do best, which is helping people lose weight and get active in their communities. We also incorporated the other gyms that were here. We wanted to make sure that we weren't competing against local businesses, but we were encouraging local businesses, and we wanted to thank them for their sponsorship and all that they did. I'm not going to give you the total of weight lost, and that's not the only measure of success, as you will learn, but we have a little potluck for all those who participated here in the coming weeks, and we hope to do this again in the future, and hopefully you'll join us if you didn't have this opportunity. It was a real success to have that many people voluntarily decide that they wanted to get active at the start of this new year. So again, what a great time, and we appreciate all your participation. With that concludes the report from the mayor, and we'll turn the time over to the report from the city manager.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing that I wanted to say is that the recruitment for the city manager is now open, so if anybody's interested, they can go to our website or go to Springstead-Waters to find out more.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We appreciate it, Tricia. Okay, with that, that'll take us to item 6, which is the call to the public. I have 2 speaker cards. We'll move to those first. First, I'd like to call up Lieutenant Colonel Alan Kirksey, who is representing the Air Force ROTC, Junior ROTC program. Come on up. And for some reason, there's something about kids having to go home and do homework. These guys are rock stars. They don't have any homework to do. Thank you for being here with us, by the way.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. First off, echoing what Reverend Jackson said, not going to talk about the shooter in Florida, but I want to talk about the 3 cadets that perished during that event. Like these kids here, put themselves in harm's way, trying to protect their classmates. 3 perished. 1 female, 2 boys. One of the boys was posthumously accepted into West Point today.
That's cool.
And I'm blessed that I'm not that ROTC instructor having to attend all those funerals. Okay. On a positive note, we have our newest unofficial pilot, Cadet Samantha Blaschke. Please stand. If you looked up last Thursday, Friday, Monday, or Tuesday, you might have thought you saw an airplane overflying Maricopa pretty low. It was. One of them was her. They took off out of Chandler, leveled off. The pilot handed the stick over to her and let her fly to, I think she was on the leg returning out of here, fly to Aqchen via Maricopa Mountain, over the football field, and then out to Aqchen, where one of those flights was met by the police chief and a couple other folks. They were extremely excited to see the folks meet them at the airplane. They actually are glad to land and safely. And then from there, they took off out of Aqchen, leveled off. The pilot handed the second group the stick to fly all the way back to Chandler. So this is something new for us, working with the Civil Air Patrol, so we are extremely excited. They're going to fly some more cadets in March. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that our other cadet, Cadet Steele, had the opportunity to go down to the state capitol to present the colors for the state senate. This is our second year doing that. And the third thing I want to tell you is our up-and-coming cadet is Cadet Fontes. Blaschke is a senior, and Steele is a sophomore, and Fontes is a freshman. Last but not least, Cadet Hill was nominated and accepted at West Point. So she is over that hump. She wants to go to Annapolis. She has always wanted to be a Marine Corps officer, and by God, she's going to will her way through it, but she is accepted in West Point. That is our update. We look forward to you all coming to visit us anytime. All of you, you're all more than welcome. We've had you guys come as well. And I would say thank you very much for the invite. Y'all have a great evening.
Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate it. The other speaker card I have is for 9.8, Brenda, so we'll hit it when we get to 9.8. Anyone else like to approach the podium and call to the public at this time? Seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close the call to the public and move on to item 7, which is the minutes. Council, can I have a motion to approve items 7.1 and 7.2, please? Have a motion. Is there a second? There's the second. Any further discussion on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. There are no public hearings for us at this time, and so we'll move past item 8 into item 9, which is the consent agenda. Council would like to have a motion to approve consent minus items 9.8 and 9.10 at this time. Have a motion. Is there a second? There's the second. Any further discussion on the motion and second? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And that'll take us to the regular city council meeting agenda, which we will hit these removed items first and foremost. So we will go to item 9.8. 9.8 is the mayor and city council to discuss and possibly take action on approving a one-year contract with Lincoln Financial, a short-term disability insurance provider, for $52,000 and authorizing the city manager to sign any necessary documentation related to this contract. This is for discussion and action. I believe Kathleen is coming up. We'll let Kathleen present, and then Brenda, if you'd like to come up under this, we'll have you come up and say your piece. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, we received a quote for our short-term disability plan that was significantly higher than the premiums we've been paying. As a result of that, I explored an option that might lower our costs and presented that option to the Personnel Benefits Subcommittee. That option was to extend the elimination period from 15 days to 21 days, and that would bring our premium to just slightly more than $1,000 above what we're paying now. If we kept the benefit as it currently is with the 15-day elimination period, then our premium would go up about $21,000. Either option is available to the council, but based on the recommendation from the Personnel Benefits Subcommittee, the item that I'm presenting is the change in the elimination period from 15 days to 21 days. And I can answer any questions you have.
Council, questions? Councilmember Smith, you had asked for this to be pulled. I'd actually throw it over to you if you have questions now, or if you'd like Ms. Campbell to come up. Which would you prefer?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't actually have any questions
Okay.
because Kathy's been very good at responding to my questions via email. But I wanted to make a couple comments. I want to make it clear that I don't take lightly a benefit change such as this. Short-term disability is important to employee families such as a new baby is coming, where a serious accident has happened. And when one finds out they have a serious illness, it becomes very, very critical. So I wanted to make sure we were looking at everything and making the right decision. So I asked some questions. First of all, and I want to make it clear because I had a couple questions from employees. Are all employees impacted by this the same? And the answer Kathy gave me was yes. Every employee across the entire city is treated, the benefit change is the same. And then I asked, were options of buy-ups considered? So let me explain what a buy-up is. In the business field that I'm familiar with, as an example, short-term disability, you normally, as Kathy explained, normally there's a 15-day or 2-week elimination period, and then companies choose, are they going to do 50% of the salary, 60%, some possibly do 100. I have never worked for anybody who does that. But a buy-up is such that if the company, or in this case the city, decided to do 15-day 21-day elimination versus the originally offered 15-day elimination, that they're 15 days, a possibility. And my understanding is that it is a possibility. We don't have the numbers yet. Kathleen is waiting for those numbers. And I want to see what the numbers are and determine, I don't need to determine whether it's valuable to employees. I think that will be an easy decision once we know what the numbers are. But I definitely would like to understand better what that number is going to end up being. And so given that, Mayor, when you're ready, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay. I guess the question I have is, I don't mean to subvert your motion here, but the question I have is it possible, and again, we still need to listen to Ms. Campbell as well, but is it possible, because the issue here is one of paying higher premiums now, and we do need to deal with this, quickly so that it doesn't continue to eat into what we already have budgeted for this position or this expense. However, you and I talked about this at one point, and I have to say that I'm a little sheepish on the fact that I did not ask about that in the benefit subcommittee, asking about the buy-up. And so, I completely concur with it, but because it is something that the employee could do, and because this is essentially the lower amount, is this something that we could still institute in the movement of a vote tonight, assuming that after all the testimony given, it's the direction that the council wants to go, but yet still provide for that to be placed in there depending on the numbers? Because the issue is this is the last council meeting in February, and March 1st is the implementation deadline. Otherwise, we would lose an entire other month. So I guess my question is for you, it's / for council, legal counsel. How do we go about doing something like that? Because, if we had more time, we could simply table it and come back to it in March. But again, that loses an entire month of paying higher premiums, and that's not the goal here. So how do we go about doing something like that?
Mayor, may I also insert there? My motion, when it comes time, was going to be to approve with the condition that when the buy-up information is understood, just as you indicated, individual employees can make that option.
Yeah,
And so if that's legal, that's...
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'm in contact with our provider. They are actively working on getting a quote for us. I anticipate that I will be getting that very soon, probably in a matter of days, at which point then we'll know what that premium is, and that could be something that would be offered to employees.
Right. I was going to say, at the very minimum, if council wants to go this route with what has been presented, it doesn't change anything. It just simply offers another layer in which the employee is paying for. So it's not a budgetary concern to the city. Therefore, I would imagine that it's just putting it in there as a part of the motion to come back and deal with it, but ultimately it doesn't cost the city anything more. I guess it does from you pay up front and then it's taken out of the paycheck. So, but it's still recouped, is my point. So I don't think. Do you see any legal problems with that, Dennis?
Mr. Mayor, I think if you want to just make your motion with that amendment.
Yeah, we haven't had a motion yet, but that would make, if she adds it to the original motion, that would make sense. But, okay, any other questions from council this time? We want to make sure that we present Ms. Campbell time to approach and ask any questions or concerns she has. Come on up, Brenda.
Thank you, Mayor Price, Vice Chair Chapados, Councilmember Smith, and the rest of the council. I do appreciate this opportunity to come before you. I know that we have elected you as the gatekeeper, so to speak, of public funds. And as a city resident, I definitely do appreciate that, and I appreciate that you are looking after that. But I'm also a city employee, And so this is something that greatly affects me and my other employees. Yes, I'm standing before you, and yes, this is a personal issue for me right now, but even if it wasn't, I think I would still be here. And why that is I appreciate the fact that you are going to be looking at other options. That is very encouraging to me. That was one of my questions well, number one, what due diligence was done in this decision? It's been about 9 years ago that I was made aware of a position that might be opening, and I was fortunate that 8.5 years ago, I was offered a position with the city of Maricopa. And at that point in time, as in any recruiting process, benefits was announced, and short-term disability was a benefit that was announced then when I came in and had my new employee orientation. It was part of the PowerPoint. When I was handed my employee handbook, again, it's outlined there, and it has been brought up at different times in the open enrollment process as part of a benefit package. Not necessarily, because it is covered by the city, it's not necessarily detailed, but it is definitely something. I came from the private sector. I don't have a lot of government experience. This is my first government experience. But short-term disability is not something that you want to plan for. I mean, so at the time when you usually have to take out that short-term disability, there are other costs that are associated. If it was an accident, there's usually, you're in the hospital, maybe your family has to be, we don't have a hospital here, so guess what? They may be staying and having hotel expenses, meal expenses, daycare expenses. There's usually other costs that are associated at that time. And while you've been successful in providing a solution that is only $1,000 difference, this is not a small change as was communicated to staff. This is a huge change to go from 80 hours to 120. I worked a 10-hour day today. It took me 10 hours to earn 20 hours of sick leave into my bank. This 40-hour change is going to be about 5.5 months that an employee will accrue that. That means that before, if this was to go into effect, that an employee has to be employed for about 1.5 years before they're going to be eligible for this benefit. I was told that I was a good steward of my time, and I appreciate that I was. There were a couple years, I've been here for 8.5 years, a couple years, and I didn't know about this in the early years, I should have taken advantage of it, but if you don't use any sick leave, you get a couple of vacation days and add it to your vacation bank. This good steward of her time spent 364 hours of her sick leave last year. It took me 4 years to accrue that sick leave. Today, as I stand before you, I have 161 hours. And unfortunately, on March 9th, I'm going to have to use 140 potentially versus the 80 that I was planning. If I had, that time, I could basically have my pay 100%. I'm trying to think what the, but I could be out for about 8 weeks with full pay and not have to worry about the extra financial expenses. But you're being asked to vote on something tonight that will take 40 hours of my sick leave that I worked about 5 months to earn. And so that is not a small change. It's a $1,000 difference that you are being provided versus a $22,000 investment in your employees that you're trying to retain. And so, again, I appreciate that you need to be fiscally responsible, but in the bigger picture, our department has been tasked with eliminating about $690,000 in our operating budget next year. And guess what? We've presented to our finance department, I know it hasn't gone to the BFO or to the full budget or to the full council, we've provided a budget that does that. So you're telling me if our department, just a single department in this organization can find $690,000, that you can't find $22,000 to invest in your employees, to give them a little bit of peace of mind, and to keep a benefit that is pretty much an industry standard. And so I know you've been tasked with something, and as my council members, mayor, vice mayor, I will support you in whatever decision, but I just wanted you to hear from an employee perspective, because this is not a small change that was asked of our employees. Also, it is a change that comes very soon. A recommendation that I would throw out is that, there be time to vet this. I appreciate, like I said, that you are exploring this. Open enrollment is, July 1. Why don't we bite the bullet, so to speak, and then try to put in together a plan that has been fully vetted out on July 1. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I didn't want to make it personal. It is personal for me, but I also am here as a champion for my fellow employees.
Thank you, Brenda, appreciate it. Council, questions, thoughts, concerns? Yes, Vice Mayor.
So, Kathleen, help me to understand, was there something unique about our city that made this premium jump? What happened that got us to this place from a financial standpoint?
Our claims went more than double. They've essentially doubled since I've been here every year.
Okay, how does that relate to the number of employees that we've had? Because not everything is status quo. So with more employees, is it new claims? Is it new hires that are submitting these claims? Is it unique circumstances that are job-related? Is it personal illness and circumstances? What is it?
They're not job-related. If they were job-related, they'd be covered by workers' comp.
Okay.
So these are personal illnesses and injuries.
So if we were to have a motion before us to support going ahead with your recommendation, if that motion was not 21.5,
So, to echo something that Brenda said, is that, Brenda, you didn't get a chance to sit in that subcommittee meeting, but, I've written insurance now for 17, 18 years. Since the time I became mayor 5.5 years ago, I've seen the benefits change. In fact, when I came into this in 2012, Councilwoman Gussie, you know what I'm about to reference here, as well as you, Councilmember Brown. We sat in a subcommittee meeting for this for probably a conglomerated 26 to 30 hours, going back and forth over numbers and challenges. But I almost fell out of my chair when I arrived here, and we had a $250 Blue Cross Blue Shield deductible. Okay, I have written insurance for 17 years, and in the last 12, I have not seen a $250 deductible, okay, for any company that I have written insurance for. And the reason is those rich, they call them rich benefits, right, because they cost money. And those rich benefits, because of usage, go up each and every year. And so it is a very delicate dance and balance between trying to find a representation of how do you keep and retain qualified employees that we want to do, and we want to reward them like any industry would, but at the same time, how do you provide something that is also being paid for by taxpayer dollars when they continue to astronomically go up year after year after year? In fact, if I remember correctly, Councilman Gussie and Councilmember Brown, forgive me, when we moved from the medical portion, not talking short-term disability here, but when we moved from the medical portion from a $250 deductible, I think we'd moved it to $500 that first go around. And in the second year, we had switched, and we were talking about going back to Blue Cross, and they wanted something like a 56% increase in that 1 year, which was like an additional $2.5 million. And I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, where do you come up with $2.5 million? It's physically impossible in this city. And so then we had to go through discussions of how do we deal with this? How do we keep this as a benefit to employees? How do we structure it? And eventually what we did is we had to evolve with the industry, and we evolved to the point of saying, we can't do that. We can't have that rich of a benefit anymore. We have to move with the evolution, because just like we found in the medical insurance world when we had the HMO, remember the advent of the HMO, when every time you got sick, you ran to the doctor? Well, it taught us that we needed to go for every sniffle to the emergency room, and costs went through the roof. And usage went through the roof. And guess what? That got passed down to us. And so it's finding this balance of how do we keep these employees, how do we pay for them, how do we reach that investment, and yet simultaneously not completely outlie a benefit at all. And in being honest with the full council here, it was discussed at this subcommittee meeting as a recommendation to you all to eliminate this benefit altogether from a standpoint of cost. That if we were going to have it, it would be completely voluntary on the employee. Well, that takes that away from our employees. And so the balance that we tried to strike was we need to find a way, and again, I want to cite something that you said, Ms. Campbell, is that we are trying to cut in one area. It's really difficult to try and cut there and then add over here when in essence we're trying to cut across the board but do it with a scalpel instead of a machete, right? And so what we're trying to look at is each and every avenue of where the dollars go, how it affects real people, and what that means for them. And I think that what the consensus that was brought to me, and again, Council, you're the deciding vote here, but what the subcommittee enlightened us with, or was gracious enough with, was to say, well, rather than go down that route of Xing it entirely and taking it away from the employee, let's try another time to say, let's see if we can hold on to it a little longer. We'll just move this a little bit more. And I know it feels like we're moving the goalpost, and I know that doesn't feel fair. But at the same time, we're trying to say, how do you still provide a benefit that the city's paying for, i.e. the taxpayers are paying for all of our city employees, instead of taking it away altogether, because those really were our options. And I see that as we continue to see increases, as you noticed, we went this past year with a trust versus a regular insurance company. And from what I'm hearing, that trust increase this year will be minimal compared to what we're used to. I mean, how many times do we have 36% increase and 25% increase? And that's unbearable. It's unbearable. It's unbearable for the taxpayer. It's unbearable for us. And then drastic things have to happen. And that means you have to cut those benefits altogether. You have to take away the things that are provided now. And so, again, I don't mean to belabor the point, but I certainly want you, Brenda, and all the employees to know how much wrangling we have gone through here to deal with this, so that we can keep as much as possible as this evolution seems to pass us by. And, I didn't look up the official stat, but again, I've been writing health insurance for 17 years, life insurance for the same, doing financial planning for the same. And I can tell you that in my estimation, again, probably shouldn't say this, but don't quote me on it as I say it from the dais, but in my estimation, I think it's probably less than 5 or 10% of all companies out there offer these types of benefits anymore. Okay, things like short-term disability, medical insurance, and paid for. When you look at fully paid for, all the way down to some of these smaller things, it's probably less than 3%. Now, whether that's a true statement or not, I'd probably have to do a little more research. But it is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so we already stand apart as a city, as a corporation, in ways that so many don't. I mean, Councilmember Smith, you and I have had discussions of big companies like General Dynamics and Motorola and Intel. And I have lots of clients that work for Intel, and the way that they have seen their benefits erode have been drastic. And it's because of the sheer expense and the usage. That's why we have it. We have it for the what ifs. But the trick is where do you find that balance in between? And so, again, I don't think this decision will make everybody happy. It just doesn't. But I think what we tried to figure out here is how do we find and make the most people happy. And I think that if you can break a middle ground here, the tweak up that I'm actually very excited about is Councilmember Smith's recommendation of what is that buy-up plan. Because if that buy-up plan, if you do that, those numbers in your head, or just in your own situation, what you might find is that buyout might be a far better deal for you than having to expend it elsewhere. So again, it's the task that we are tasked with, it's the decisions we have to make, but with that, I would leave it that the fact that this council and certainly that subcommittee really did wrangle over a variety of issues, back and forth, pro and con, trying to anticipate all of the issues, all of the scenarios, both individual and collective, and find the happiest middle ground we possibly could. So I would leave it at that. Council, any other questions? Yes, Councilor Wade.
Just a quick question on the types of cases where we've had to use the fund. What is there, kind of like 17 car accidents and maybe 13 falling off the roof? So how does that actually pan
Well,
out?
I think Councilman Wade, Mayor Price, Councilman Smith did a good job of kind of describing. It is supportive for people who have maternity leave. So this is an excellent benefit for someone who's on maternity leave, so they don't have to use all of their sick leave for that absence. And then the others are a combination of illness and injury.
And you said that we're unusually high at this point. Is there a period of time where we may peak out and then start to digress or fall back? Or is this something we can expect to have it to continue to increase over and over, year after year, or year upon year?
So Mayor Price, Councilman Wade, this was discussed at the subcommittee. I don't know whether or not this was a fluke year or whether or not it's symptomatic of how it will go from now on. I don't know. So each year at this point we'll be seeing what the insurance company, what our experience is and what they're willing to quote us.
How many employees have actually utilized the fund over the last year? How many total employees?
15,
So 15 people, and how many employees do we have?
251.
250. So 15 people have had an impact on 250.
Yes, Councilman Wade, that's correct.
Thank you.
I think the other side to note on that is that, you know, one of the other things that, again, I expressed earlier, the HMO taught us to run to the doctor whenever we were sick. Then we moved to the deductible and the PPO, right? And the PPO said, well, you have this out-of-pocket expense now and maybe a co-insurance, and that will maybe persuade you from running to the doctor quite so fast, right? And then it went higher deductibles, and then you have the advent of the HSA, and it's super high deductibles. And the whole purpose of that, again, I'm not speaking for the insurance company here, but I'm telling you, this is their mindset, that the advent of that is to get you to manage your health better than running to the doctor. Now, again, we have insurance to cover us for those what-ifs, but they want you to not utilize it because it's a numbers game. And so it's a catch-22. We have it because we need it. But at the same time, those 15 people, if collected premiums was, our premium this year on this rate is $50,000, but the expenditure of that was $350,000, then clearly they didn't make any money. You do that across the board, and how long can that insurance company stay in business? So again, they're in business to make money, just like we're in business to use them as we need and see fit. We're planning for those what-ifs. But again, the idea here is you're having to push more and more of this onto the consumer, and that's the way they're doing it. They're evolving it. So whether we want to evolve to it or not, we can either pay for it or we can dump it. But there's not a middle ground to that. They're moving past us. They're moving to the point where they're going to change it till they reach this happy medium of whatever they feel. But that's the way the insurance companies work. It's the way they think, and it's the way that they stay in business. So, yep.
I actually had a physical today out at the base, out at Luke Air Force Base. And I felt as though the doctor was allowing me to make the decision because he didn't want to. So when I left there, I felt like I did my own plan, you know, my own referrals and the whole 9 yards because the doctor didn't want to step out and make those decisions. So It was not a very good feeling, to be quite honest with you.
And, you know, not to go into detail there, but, you know, when we talk health insurance and health reform and all this stuff that goes on in Washington, D.C., you know, what triggers it is stuff like that. And what you're telling me there is the same thing that a lot of doctors tell me. My brother and father in the medical profession, I have a brother who's a doc, a pediatric doc, and specializes in infectious diseases, and another who's a physician's assistant, been in the medical field for 35 years. And in that process, you know, one of the things they'll tell you is that tort and tort reform, the lawsuits that happen to a doctor are what drive probably 80% of health insurance costs. And that applies to all insurance across the board, whether it's you know, car insurance, whether it's whatever, it's those lawsuits. And so that tort, as it goes up, and until there's some sort of capping or tort reform that goes into some piece of legislation that deals with health insurance or insurance companies or something along those lines, then while that continues to be the biggest payout that goes to the insurance company, that's money out flying, then it's not going to change. And so it's trickling down to your doctor. And that's an interesting statement that you make. So again, all for capitalism, but there's a balance here, and just trying to figure that one out. Okay, any other questions or concerns at this time? Any other discussion pieces? Anything? With that, I think we then would move to Councilmember Smith for a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to Brenda Campbell for the comments. I take earnestly the comments and needs of our employees very seriously, and I appreciate you coming forward. I want to make sure that we have the best offerings for our employees, and so when I think about when you challenge us, can we find $20,000? Yes, I think we could find $20,000, but if you look at short-term disability as a piece of the whole benefits package, there are so many things that could go up in the next 3 months, 6 months in terms of health benefits. So I feel as though the short-term disability is just a small piece, and I could find 20, but then can I find 150 for the next thing that goes up? I think a good compromise is to look at the buy-up, and so given that, I'd like to offer a motion. And Dennis, if I don't say it exactly the way we need to say it, just let me know. I'm going to say it as I wrote it. I motion to approve item 9.8, adding that if the numbers for a buy-up option comes back beneficial to employees, that we also approve this employee option.
That's the
Does that work?
motion. Acceptable?
Okay. That I authorize the city manager to sign for that additional option.
Motion's on the table. Is there a second? There's the second. Is there further discussion? Yes, Councilor Wade.
I just want to be really clear on how we're voting. Yes means we agree with you, or no means, not you, but yes means we agree with the policy or move forward, or no means we do not.
Yeah, the recommendation is to link into the 21 days for the 23 weeks, and it's approximately $1,000, about $1,200, the overall increase to that plan, and plus the potential buy-up as the numbers come in, and then if that will be presented to all of us and ultimately to the staff, and then they can decide whether they want to maintain the richer plan at 15 days.
At the cost of the employee.
At the cost of the employee.
Okay.
Correct. So yeah, a yes vote would mean you agree with the recommendation and the motion as made. Yes, we'll go to Councilmember Manfredi and then to Vice Mayor.
And just to clarify, there'd be no additional cost for the city with the buyout plan. So
Correct.
we wouldn't be facing the extra 21,000.
That's correct. The cost would be basically a stacked plan that would be borne entirely, the richer plan would be borne entirely by the employee. Correct? Vice Mayor.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand as well. So if the numbers come back, the way I heard the motion made was if the numbers are beneficial, we would approve the buy-up. But now I'm hearing that that would be a separate action that needs to come back to us for that specific action?
No.
No?
No. I was just saying it would be presented to us. It's not, it's got to come.
So it's one motion tonight, and if the numbers play out, nothing's coming back to us, that can be an option that we can offer to our employees?
Yeah, I don't mean for it to sound like it's coming back to us. I mean, we'd get an email stating that these were the numbers. That's all. Correct.
Okay.
So we're approving the entire process
Correct.
With the amendment.
with the amendment?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Is that clear? Okay. Any other questions or concerns this time? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
2 noes. So we have 5 to 2. So we have a no from Councilmember Wade, and no from Councilmember Chapdos. Okay? So 5-2. The motion passes, and that carries us on to item 9.10. 9.10, the mayor and city council shall discuss and possibly take action on approving funding for fire department citywide incident pre-plans with vendor pre-planners LLC in an amount not to exceed $48,000 to be paid from contingency. This is for discussion and action. I will turn it over to Councilmember Smith, who pulled this.
Well, I'd certainly like to hear from the chief first. I might pick up some additional information. I went through all of the information that's within the packet, and if you have anything in addition to add, I'd be happy to hear that.
Mayor,
Unless you want to hear from me first and then go back, it's up to you. I'd like to hear anything in addition that you have to say.
Councilmember Smith, basically what a pre-plan is, just to give you the background, it is a document that is put into the computer and is also in a hard copy. And our command officers, when they go to an incident, they look at this document and it shows all the fire characteristics or access characteristics of a building. Currently, we do not have any. This building in particular, we don't have anything on this. Copper Sky, nothing. The schools, nothing. We recognized this probably 2 years ago as we started sorting through all the issues that we had. And basically, we tried to do this ourselves, and we failed miserably. This is very technical. It involves a CAD, the Phoenix CAD, and it also involves GIS. We tried doing hand drawings. We tried everything to do that. So we reached out to people who do this for a living. And what essentially we've done is, because we're in the Automatic Aid Consortium, we're not the only ones that use this. Once we do this and we do it correctly, it adds safety to not only our firefighters, but our additional help that comes when we have an incident. Right now, when people come in, as well as our own commanders, they are blind. They don't have any of the characteristics of this building. Things like where the fire control room is, where the sprinkler controls are, where the hydrants are, where the anything having to do with that, where the air conditioning, the electrical shutoffs, all those kind of things. And as a former commander, I would be blind without that. I would go into an incident and I would be creating my plan based on that layout that's available. So what we did, we reached out to them, we identified the buildings that we need to do. We reached out to a company that does it for Queen Creek and Gilbert and Mesa and Sun Lakes, and we sent them over and they did some samples for us to see what it would be. And then we worked with Phoenix Fire, the alarm room, to get those. We want to get those into the system. And once those are in the system, not only can our commanders use them, but all of our automatic aid partners have access to that as well. So it's a huge safety item for me. When it became very clear to me when we were looking at adding a GIS person to the staff, which we desperately need in my opinion, I started doing my own research and looking at what we had and what we didn't have, and I was appalled. Shame on me for not recognizing it sooner. So essentially, this is to me, it's a must-have for safety, and to wait puts us and our responding partners at a very big disadvantage.
Thank you. So I'm going to approach this from an angle that's completely from a different perspective. But I first want to say that through all the information I read, through what you shared here tonight, I agree that it is a must-have. But the city has lots of other must-haves. And so when I was pondering and analyzing this, I came to realize that normally when we're using contingency funds, we're approving something for a whole amount that's a one-time expense and that we deem as important and critical to the city, which this is. But this comes with a recurring aspect as well, $5,000 if I've interpreted everything correctly, recurring every year. And so when I thought about being on the BFO, I'm in the middle of the budget process now, and I have to consider other requests similar to this that might be considered critical to the city. Why is this not part of that? I came to the conclusion it really should be part of that. Here we are almost in March. We're going to be approving a brand new budget in June. And if this is part of that approved budget at that point, then we move forward, and what I've lost is 3 months. But what I've gained is clarity in terms of what are the other must-haves, what additional items will come forward from the fire department or other departments, and can I afford them all together? So I feel as though there's clarity in waiting the additional 3 months, and so that's my logic, and given that, I'd like to make a motion when you're ready, Mayor.
Council, other questions or concerns? Yes. Mr. Wade.
Chief, thank you for your information. Is this an item that would have normally required a CFO or required to have been completed prior to a CFO? The certificate of occupancy.
Mayor, Councilmember Wade, not necessarily. Other cities I'm familiar with have that as part of their, when the developer comes in, they provide the documents that we need, and we are doing that now. Where we fall short is we had no way of getting it into the Phoenix alarm system. It was never done before. So,
well, that's why I asked the question. You know, we as our own city didn't necessarily require that, but under normal circumstances, look at Phoenix or one of the other municipalities, that would be something that would be considered part of their occupancy requirements.
it would not fall on the occupant in any way, shape, or form. It would strictly be with the city. Other cities have their GIS department, and as soon as a new building or a new development comes into play, it goes through the process, it goes to that department, and it's kicked out to their alarm or to their alarm room instantly. Mm-hmm. We don't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. The $5,000 that Councilmember Smith referred to, that is designed for future development. And once we kick this off, and if we can catch up, basically, the cost is minimal. But once we have to get the process established so that we can get it into the Phoenix alarm system to begin with.
What buildings have you identified that need?
I think we've got 96 so far.
96 buildings.
Yeah. And we're anticipating, just through growth, additional buildings each year.
And so are these buildings all municipal buildings, or are they commercial buildings, or what are we counting, I guess?
They're every building. They're Bash's, they're Walmart, they're this building, they're Copper Sky, they're the schools, they're all of them.
So I think I understand the importance of it, and that's why I'm asking that question, because it seems to me that we've been dodging a bullet for a long time by not having that capability.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Finished? Councilmember Brown?
To piggyback on my colleague's question, that deficiency, was that a result of cities' ineptitude, or what caused the fact that that wasn't taken care of?
Mayor, Councilmember Brown, that's an interesting question. When I first got here, as we started talking to our command officers, our battalion chiefs, they were somewhat comfortable, but they've been here for a long, long time. When we realized, the first time this came to bear was we looked at, and it happened to have been Fry's. And it was the only one on the system. What it was a hand-drawn picture. It offered no information. Okay, so we started the process by which we had a light-duty person that had shoulder surgery go out and start hand-drawing these things and then trying to get them into the Phoenix system. I will say it again, we failed miserably because we don't have that expertise. So, and we worked on that for some time. We've been aware of the problem, but it's multifaceted because it involves Phoenix Fire, it involves Pinell County, it involves the city, It involves the fire department. When we started looking into this deeper, we looked at buildings like, or even streets. When we extended Edison around to 238, it still does not exist on our mapping system. The fleet facility that we built is not on our mapping system. None of it was on there. And so we brought everybody together. We brought Pinell County, we brought Phoenix Fire, and we brought the city officials together to find out where the disconnect was. And I think we've resolved that. Where I'm coming from is the fact that we do not have a GIS department. We don't have the capacity to remedy this problem. That's why we reached out to get these people. It's of extreme importance to me, just having been a command officer, knowing what I would be thinking when I'm approaching an incident. It can be an all-hazard incident. It doesn't have to be a fire. It can be a fire, it can be whatever. But I rely on that information to formulate my plan. And I think we have people here that are comfortable, and that's only part of the problem. I rely on automatic aid. And if I'm an automatic aid partner and I'm coming into their city, they have it in their system. I don't go into their system blind. They come into this system blind. They have no information on our buildings, nothing. And I just think it's critical that we remedy this problem as quickly as possible. And even the process takes a little bit, because the drawings have to be created and they have to be inputted into the Phoenix system, so it's not overnight. As a matter of fact, if this is approved, some of those funds will probably have to be rolled forward to next year, because we won't have time to get them all done before June 30th.
That was going to be another question. Is what you're asking for, is it enough to do what needs to be done?
It's enough to do the 96 buildings we've identified. We may have to split some of that and move it forward into the next budget year in order to complete them all. But it is enough. And then the 5 years, or the $5,000 per year, is slated for future development.
And is there a priority system, like what building you're going to go after first, and you have some type of priority system for which buildings are going to be first, and so on and so forth?
Absolutely. We would look at schools first. We would look at the major big box buildings probably second.
Okay. Councilman Brown? Do you have something?
Chief, is this knowledge something that our first firefighters in 2007 came into being, that Pinell County officials would have told them at some point, you need to think about that down the line? Is this something that Pinell County knew about?
Mayor, Councilmember Brown, probably not. This is very fire specific. It's for command officers. The mapping issue that I discussed earlier with Pinell County, that was more of a communication issue, which we've resolved, but they would have had no knowledge of our problem.
All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Chief, thank you for bringing a problem that has existed for a number of years to the forefront. We actually had a GIS person at one point that was eliminated. I think this is also something that is not unique to fire and medical. Just about every department in this city could be affected by GIS. Police comes to mind right off the bat, development services, community services. There's a lot of different incidents. I see this as the first attempt to fill that void that has been lacking, and I'm glad to see it's coming from a public safety standpoint. I think it's something that we've long needed. I anticipate that we'll see a lot of either SURFs or budgeted amounts in our upcoming budget for the next fiscal year to fix this problem, because we're one of the few cities, as I understand it, that doesn't have GIS capabilities, and it's something that every department needs as we continue to grow. I don't know how many public records requests I see in a week that show me my as-built from my property, or show me where this building connects to that building, or show me the infrastructure for this area. We don't have that, so I wanted to thank you for bringing this item forward. I think it's long overdue.
Mr. Mayor, I would just
Yes.
like to say that Carrie is working on a SURF for GIS for the city as a whole, so you will be seeing that when we go through the budget process.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time? Councilmember Smith, turn it back over to you.
When I read through the information, I want to make a clarification because you make the comment that if approved tonight, the $48,000 will be spent between now and the end of June, or there may be a rollover. But when I read the information, it said their contract period for the $48,000, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is from here to the end of 2018. And so I interpreted that meaning the 93 buildings that you're going to lay out are going to be done over the next 6, 7, 8 months using that $48,000. And then at that point, there'd be a $5,000 recurring yearly cost. So just to clarify that first.
Mayor, Councilmember Smith, that's correct. What I'm referring to is the fact that we have until whatever the cutoff is for this fiscal year to spend. We can't spend it that fast.
Right.
So it is dedicated to those 90 some odd buildings.
Yeah.
But some of it will probably have to roll forward into the next year's budget to accommodate the buildings that we can't get to before June 30th.
So this contract with this company would be for the $48,000, and regardless of our fiscal calendar, you're saying that they would be approved for the $48,000 into next year, next fiscal year. Is that how I'm to interpret it?
I'm not sure if this is semantics or not, but
Yeah.
we're looking at the $48,000 as enough to do that many buildings.
Yeah, 93,
Yeah,
for whatever length of time it takes.
Right. We're going to do is, obviously, in my mind, we're going to do them as fast as we can possibly do them because I want them on the computer and I want them
Right.
in hard copy. But it's physically probably impossible to get them all done before June 30th. So that's why I'm going to move some of that money forward. The $5,000 is an ongoing, as the city grows, because it's taking off, as they build new buildings, that will be accounted for with that $5,000.
Right, and that would start as of July of 2018 or July
Correct.
of 2019?
July, it's in the budget system now as July of 2018.
So I've been given some information that Doug Wolf, our county assessor, made a comment today in a session that new high-tech mapping system that he has is going to be soon deployed and available for public service groups. And it'll do better than drawn maps that he's familiar with. So are you aware of that? Has he made you aware of that? Is that connected, since I'm not an expert, is that connected to what you're doing with this $48,000 and $5,000 a year? Does this solve the problem? Should we take a look at it?
Mayor, Councilmember Smith, it does not. This is so fire specific in terms of what Phoenix Fire offers us. And be honest with you, it's a little bit limited, but it's the best thing that we have to date. Now,
Okay.
if we would probably have to switch, and please don't do that, we would probably have to switch our alarm room system in order to accompany somebody else's outside product. Phoenix Fire is in the process of looking at upgrading their system, and that may change the whole process. What this is for us is a simple PDF file, and it goes into their system. It's accepted into their system, and it shows up on our mapping system as an icon. And if the address that we're responding to is that address, we click on that icon, and it opens up a whole new window for the command officer to look at everything that's associated with that address, including contacts, responsible party, everything you can imagine. And we can expand that too to add aerial photos, which are also very nice to have.
Well, Chief, you're very convincing, but I have to go with my initial feelings in that this is 3 months premature in a request, in that I feel like it should be part of the normal budget process. I can't analyze where the recurring cost fits in regards to priority, or although I'm sure it's going to rank high, but what other high elements are you going to be bringing during the budgeting process? And I feel uncomfortable definitely going forward with a recurring cost. And if I authorize the $48,000, then I'm saying I'm authorizing the recurring cost. It goes hand in hand because doing 93 buildings and not continuing the process doesn't seem to make sense. So I'm going to make a motion that we reject this item, 9.10, and that it be part of the normal budgeting process.
Is there a motion on the table to reject this item and make it a part of the normal budgeting process? Is there a second? Is there a second? Seeing none, the motion on the table fails. Is there another motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Brown.
I move the approval of 9.10.
So there's a motion and a second for 9.10 as it is planned at this time. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
In the motion of 6-1, the motion passes, 6-1 at this time, the motion passes. That'll take us to the regular city council agenda, to whom Judge Riggs has been waiting so patiently. He hasn't had a long day at court or anything, so we're glad he stuck around with us. But Judge, we'd like to invite you up to reach item 10.1. The mayor and city councilors are here, a presentation from Judge Lyle Riggs regarding the small claims pilot project. Council, you have some handouts at your desk that I assume came from Judge Riggs.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. When I looked at the agenda tonight, I thought, I'm going to have the distinct privilege of being both the longest and the shortest presentation on the regular agenda. At this point, the goal is to be the shortest. This is April Squire. She is one of the 10 clerks that works at the court. She resides here in Maricopa, and up until about 18 months ago, worked for the other Maricopa, and we managed to persuade her to come home and work with us. She brings a wealth of knowledge, a great deal of experience, and is a wonderful addition to our staff. She, along with Krista Beavers, they are the team that handles the civil actions, mostly in the justice court. The city court, only civil actions the city court really has are orders of protection, which she and Krista also take care of. So I brought her here in case you want real and intelligent answers. She can provide those. I'll just kind of give an overview. So I really appreciate April being here. She's volunteered to be here tonight to give of her time, so I appreciate it. The two handouts, the one we're going to look at the most is the one that's on the front. It's got a lot of writing at the top. It says Notice to Plaintiff and Defendant. And we're going to get to that in a moment. Before those make sense, let me just outline what the problem is that we're trying to address with this pilot program. As you may recall, the justice courts in Arizona have jurisdiction in civil disputes up to $10,000. The vast majority of the cases that we see are collection cases, old credit card debts. We also see a great deal of HOA collections. Within that jurisdiction is it's a subset, and that's our small claims jurisdiction. In small claims, the most that can be at dispute is $3,500. This is supposed to be a very quick and easy way for two people that have a dispute to come into court and get their matter resolved. There are very special rules that apply to the small claims court. First, no attorneys allowed on either side unless both sides agree. This is simply an opportunity for people to come before a judge and have it decided. Second, there is no discovery, no disclosure. In a civil dispute, each side has to basically put together a script that they give to the other side that says, if we go to trial, this is our case, this is why the law is on our side, these are our witnesses, and this is why we think we should win. And then there can be depositions, there can be written interrogatories, there's a whole process that can really draw out the civil process. So none of that's allowed in small claims. Essentially what happens right now is the plaintiff files a complaint saying, I believe the other person owes me whatever the amount is, as long as it doesn't exceed $3,500. Service is the next step. Usually the service is done, they can send the complaint with a summons from the court that is sent by certified return receipt mail. And as long as the plaintiff presents to the court the green card, as we call it, which is the signature saying the person received it, they've now been served. They have 120 days to get that service done. The next step, the defendant then files an answer or asks that the case be transferred to civil court or asks that it be transferred to another venue entirely. Once the answer is filed, then we set the matter for a hearing. that sounds really good, and we'd hoped it would be simple. Here's what we have found out. In today's world where people move so frequently, people don't always have a good address, so they can't get service done. So 120 days go by, I send an order out saying, your case is going to be dismissed because you didn't get service, and they don't have any idea what the other options were for getting service done. So that's one of the problems. They do get service done. The other person doesn't file an answer, and they don't know what to do. They don't know that they can come in and ask for a default judgment. So the case sits on the court's calendar for 10 months until I can send a notice out saying, you've got 2 months to resolve your case. If you don't, we're going to dismiss it. The other problem is we finally do get the answer. We set it for a hearing, and the parties show up for the hearing, and they're not prepared. They don't know what they needed to do for a hearing. And there's really no way, there's no option currently for the court to be involved and say, these are your options for preparing for the hearing. And so what we have found over the years is a lot of these cases that should be resolved quite quickly languish on the court's calendar for an extended period of time. So that's the current problem. Any other problem we need to address on that you're dealing with? All right. So here's what we're trying to do. And there's a couple of different pilot projects that are being implemented. And our court is one of them that's being selected. The Casa Grande Justice Court is also participating in this, and a couple of other courts up in Maricopa County. This is not the only pilot program that's being tested. Another one that's being tested is to simply create a system where the entire dispute is being resolved online, that nobody actually comes to court. The Apache Junction Justice Court is working on a pilot program to resolve that. But here's what the rules are proposing now. And so if you want to turn on that packet that I told you we'd be looking at to the 3rd page, at the top it says small claims deadlines in a nutshell. So the first big change is that when the complaint is filed and the court issues a summons telling the defendant answer, we're giving them a hearing date that's 45 to 60 days out from when the complaint is filed. What we hope, ideally, is they get service done by the same card or the same process that's been in place. We get an answer filed, although an answer is no longer going to be required, and everybody shows up at 60 days, and we have the hearing. If all goes well, and we expect that the majority of the cases will follow that track and be resolved in 60 days. That, to me, is speedy resolution of a dispute that two people may have. Now, dealing with the problems. If service wasn't achieved, the court now has an opportunity to say, what's your problem? How come you didn't get service done? Sometimes they really didn't understand that they have they're required to get service done, so we get to explain that. We can explain there are other options. If they're not signing the card at the other end, here are some other options, and I can walk them through the other options they have to achieve service. If the service was made but no answer filed and the defendant doesn't show up, we can actually enter a default at 60 days. If the defendant shows up, not quite ready for a hearing, then we can extend it out. So the 60 days gives us an opportunity to address some of these problems that we see over and over, and if necessary, then we can extend the hearing out another 30 to 60 days to give the parties an opportunity to address those problems. But it allows the court to be more active in moving these cases along and helping the participants have a fair opportunity to be heard. If the problem is service, I explain their options. I can give them another 60 days to try and get service done. If service has been done, a lot of plaintiffs don't understand that they can actually ask for a default judgment. If the other party doesn't show up, doesn't want to get involved, we enter a default judgment. That judgment is enforceable. They can garnish wages, garnish bank accounts, go after property. It's a valid judgment that they can use then to get satisfaction. So it allows us to move that forward. And then, as I said, the last one with defendants, and even the plaintiffs sometimes, they don't really understand, oh, I have a hearing. What am I supposed to do? And this gives us a chance to explain that. The last part, I think, is from a judge's standpoint, is incredibly important. There's no appeal from small claims. I am it. Once I announce my decision, we're done. And so to make sure that everybody really has an opportunity to present their evidence and be heard, this gives us an opportunity to do that. So when I mentioned this to the mayor, I said, you know, all of you I know have constituents out there that you deal with. This isn't a city court matter in the truest sense of the word. But nonetheless, most of the people that come into small claims courts are the very same constituents that you all have. And I just thought this would be a way to get the opportunity out and try and answer questions. So before anything else that's changed? All right, so what questions do they have? And I'll let April give you real answers. So,
Council, questions for Judge Riggs? Yes, Councilor Smith.
I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to make a comment because I love Judge Judy. It sounds like the process that you use is more gentle, welcoming, and fair than that process. So that's good to hear.
I don't take offense at very many things, but if you compare me to Judge Judy,
I didn't compare you. Well, I guess I did
and
compare
I know
you.
you did, Councilmember. I know you did. But this is the right version.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Not only did April come and those courts, their cases.
And I appreciate it.
Councilmember Brown.
It's coming. And is that always?
Years that's changed. At one point, I think in my 3,000. So periodically, the
Because another jurisdiction.
Supreme Court with all these answers, response, and its extent, then it is a
under the rubric of access to justice, and there is a great disparity, and sometimes that's not leading to justice. It's allowing those who have the education, who have the resources, to have an upper hand in a system that should be fair. Particularly here in a community like ours, it's not just always a matter of education and resource. Sometimes it's a question of language.
Yep.
We're very good about using interpreters for every language because this is about getting what we hope, what we strive for is the right result.
Absolutely.
If the money is owed, it should be paid.
Sure.
And the right amount should be paid. And so that shouldn't, I hope that's not always a function. And I know, I mean, we all see what goes on out there, but to try and minimize someone winning simply because they have greater resources, greater intelligence, greater understanding is not what I hope the system is about.
Absolutely. So it's a way of leveling the playing field. No, I think it's a great idea, and I'm excited to see the Supreme Court roll something like this out, and hopefully it'll, have a good measurement. And now, what would be the next step? That information, is it gathered from all these courts that pilot it, that take those numbers and then take it back to the Supreme Court, who will, in some essence, take it back to the legislature to change the law, or
no,
what is?
Well, it doesn't require a legislative change to implement this pilot program. This is a rules change.
Okay.
And several years ago, the Supreme Court asserted itself and says, as a co-equal branch of government, we have the right to set rules of procedure. Now, the legislature occasionally push back, change a law, and so again, coming back to what Councilmember Brown brought up, if they want to change the jurisdiction, that is a legislative change that would have to happen. But in terms of these procedures, that's within the court's authority. And so we started the pilot program actually January 4th, I think, was the official date. We're going to run it for a year. And over the next, right now monthly, I'm going to be talking with people at AOC, trying to give them feedback on what we're seeing happen. And so at the end of the year, then, what we're hoping is to be able to provide feedback on the second handout that I've given you, which are the rules. One of the concerns that's being brought up is right now under this rule, the defendant doesn't have to file an answer or even pay a filing fee if they file an answer. Well, we're all concerned about how do we pay for stuff, and that's something we have to watch out for. And so that's already one issue that's been brought up. But over the year, the idea is to provide feedback, and then by the end of the year, from the different courts, be able to provide to the Supreme Court that feedback and potentially implement these rules.
Interesting. Vice Mayor.
Judge, thank you so much for bringing this presentation forward. I think it also is a good thing. But I was wondering, has there been any discussion or there been any resources allocated for awareness and education about these new procedures?
This is it. There really hasn't been. I offered to come and do this. I appreciate all of you giving the time. I figured this was one way to reach out. I've offered the same thing to the Board of Supervisors to try and reach out countywide. April helped me, and we put together a cover letter, I guess we called it, that we sent out. We have some particular parties that appear frequently. HOAs use this process quite frequently, so we sent them a letter. We're trying to generate the publicity that we can at court, but in terms of having any monies allocation to do anything like that, no.
Well, I for one look forward to some updates, and hopefully you'll have success with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Judge
Mr. Mayor. Thank you,
Riggs. Thank you,
Council.
April, for
Appreciate it.
being here. We really appreciate this. And one of the things I think that hopefully that we can do is, Tricia, if we can kind of maybe get with Jennifer Brown and maybe with Judge Riggs and talk a little bit, something that we can put on our website where we can talk a little bit about this, or just some sort of a press release or something along those lines. Certainly the media is in the audience today if that's something they choose to write about, but is something that I think is something that kind of stand up and toot our own horn that we've been chosen for this. It's certainly a turnaround from where our court was several years ago. So again, thank you for all your hard work and all your efforts in that. And I think that anything we can do to make justice a little speedier and a little more fair is a good thing.
All right,
So,
thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, well, Council, that concludes our regular agenda. That concludes item 10.1. We do have another item that we have to hit in E-session, so can I have a motion to move back to E-session, please? So moved. Motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll stand adjourned for a few weeks. Thanks for being here.